The message came late, 11:02 p.m., on a quiet Thursday in early spring. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, glasses slipping down her nose, surrounded by little souvenir bags she had packed with care, sunscreen bottles, shell necklaces, and tiny keychains that said "Aloha" from Grandma. Her phone buzzed. It was from her son Lucas.
You won't be joining us, Mom. Sophie wants to keep this trip just for her side of the family. You've already done your part by paying.
Evelyn froze. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence that followed. She stared at the message until the screen dimmed. No call, no thank you, no warmth, just cold. Typed words, the kind that erased 30 years of motherhood in a single breath. She had planned this trip for 3 years, saved from her tutoring sessions, yard sales, and careful grocery lists. Every penny had gone into the Hawaii Family Vacation Fund, a dream she thought would reconnect her family after her husband's passing. But in that moment, it wasn't just the trip that vanished. It was her place in their lives. Evelyn remembered how Sophie had started small. Little comments, quiet corrections, a rolled eye when Evelyn shared old stories. Holidays slowly moved to Sophie's mother's house. Then photos without her, smiles that didn't include her face. And now, a text message that said she was no longer part of the family she built. She looked at the small duffel she had packed. 2 sundresses, a framed photo of her late husband David, and a lavender candle she meant to light with her grandchildren by the beach. Now the candle sat unlit, the dream extinguished before it began. She stared at the phone again, her hand trembling. She could call, she could plead, but what would she even say? Instead, she whispered to the dark kitchen, "I see now. I was never part of their story, just the one who paid for the pages." Then she opened her old laptop and clicked on the folder named Hawaii Fund. The number glowed back at her, $21,763. Money built on love, spent on hope. Her finger hovered over one button, freeze account, but she didn't click. Not yet, because some heartbreaks deserve silence before action. As the house sank into darkness, Evelyn didn't know it yet, but by sunrise her silence would speak louder than any revenge could. The next morning, Evelyn woke before sunrise. Not because of excitement, but because her body had forgotten what rest felt like. The house was wrapped in stillness, the kind that only grief can create. She moved through the kitchen like a ghost, folding the same towel twice, straightening a picture that didn't need it. Her husband David's smile looked back at her from a photo by the window. Once that smile was her anchor. Now it was her only witness. Her mind replayed the message again and again. "You've already done your part by paying." Those words didn't sting, they hollowed her. She made herself a cup of weak tea, hands trembling slightly as the kettle hissed. The lavender candle sat on the counter, untouched, like a reminder of everything she had lost. Not a vacation, but belonging. Later that day, she checked her email. Among the grocery receipts and newsletters sat one subject line that stopped her heart. Final confirmation, Pacific Paradise Villa. She clicked. 8 names: Lucas, Sophie, their 2 kids, Sophie's parents, her sister's boyfriend, not Evelyn, her name, missing, like she'd never existed. She stared at the list until the words blurred. Maybe it was a mistake, she thought. Maybe she was on another booking, but she wasn't. There were no more attachments, no 9th ticket. Her phone rang then, Sophie's voice, falsely cheerful. "Hi, Evelyn. Just finalizing everything. The last payment hits tomorrow, right?" Evelyn's throat tightened. "Is there anything you need me to bring for the kids? Snacks, maybe?" "Oh no. You don't need to bring anything." Actually, Sophie's tone sharpened under the sweetness. "It might be best if you took this time to rest. Focus on yourself." The call ended with polite words that felt like daggers. Evelyn stood frozen, tea gone cold in her hands. She walked slowly to her bedroom, opened a fireproof box, and pulled out the travel documents she had kept safe for years. The name on every page read, Account holder, Evelyn May Turner. Authorized users, none. Her breathing steadied. Every transaction, every booking, every luxury they were about to enjoy was hers. And suddenly she realized something profound. They hadn't excluded her by mistake. They'd done it because they thought she'd never fight back. She closed the box gently, almost tenderly, like sealing a promise. Then she looked toward the window, where the morning light spilled through the blinds, and whispered across the table. "Rest," she murmured. "Yes, but not the way they think." As the sun rose over the quiet Oregon sky, Evelyn made her first real decision to stop being invisible. And soon her silence would have consequences they'd never see coming. That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table again, the same spot where she'd once written holiday cards and birthday wishes. But this time, the table felt like a battlefield. Memories on one side, truth on the other. The house around her was still, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. She could almost hear David's voice, calm, steady, full of quiet humor. "Don't let people mistake your kindness for weakness, Evie," he used to say. She hadn't listened, until now. Her laptop blinked awake on the table. She stared at the banking screen, her cursor hovering above the freeze account button. It would take just one click to stop everything. The villa payment, the flights, the car rentals. Every card Sophie and Lucas planned to use was linked to this account. She could stop it all. But Evelyn didn't click. Not yet. Instead, she opened a blank document and began to type. Not a reply to her son, not a plea for understanding, but a list. Women who deserve to be seen. She typed names that had lived quietly in her heart for years. Carol, her neighbor, whose son hadn't spoken to her since she remarried. June, who lost her husband and still baked for every church event. Nora, who helped raise her grandchildren but wasn't invited to their graduations. Beverly, who once told Evelyn she'd never seen the ocean. By the time she reached the fourth name, Evelyn stopped typing and leaned back. Her eyes burned, not from tears, but from something else. Resolve. She looked again at the total on her screen. $21,763.84. 3 years of believing love would bring them closer. 3 years of sacrifice that had bought her nothing but distance. Her hand trembled as she hovered over the freeze button once more. Then she clicked. A small window popped up. "Are you sure you want to pause all linked transactions?" She smiled faintly and whispered, "I'm sure." The confirmation message appeared, all linked cards disabled. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The sound that left her wasn't quite laughter, but it wasn't sorrow either. It was relief. She picked up one of the souvenir bags meant for her youngest grandchild, took out the keychain, and placed it on the table. "Maybe it's time this story belonged to someone who remembers me," she said softly. She stood, turned off the kitchen light, and let the glow from the laptop fill the room. It was small, quiet, but powerful. Because for the first time in years, Evelyn had chosen herself. What Evelyn didn't know was that her quiet click would set off a chain of moments that would redefine everything. Not just for her, but for the family who had erased her. The day of the flight arrived with a deceptive calm. Evelyn woke early, brewed her coffee, and sat by the kitchen window as the Oregon sky blushed in pale gold. On the table beside her, her phone buzzed again and again. Group chat messages lighting up the screen. Photos. Sophie and Lucas were at the airport, smiling with their matching straw hats and branded luggage. The kids were grinning, holding tiny neck pillows shaped like dolphins. Sophie's caption sparkled across social media. "Off to paradise. Family only." The last 2 words burned, but Evelyn didn't look away. She sipped her coffee slowly, her expression unreadable. The time on the clock read 8:14 a.m. At 8:15, the freeze she had set on her travel fund would activate. Across the country, at Portland International Airport, the family approached the check-in counter, chatting, laughing, unaware of what waited on the other side of that minute hand. When the agent swiped their card for the first time, a small red notification appeared on her screen. Transaction declined. Lucas frowned. That can't be right, he said, forcing a smile. Try it again. The agent did. The same error appeared. Then again. Sophie's cheerful mask cracked. What do you mean declined? We paid everything in full. Lucas's phone buzzed, notification after notification. Payment authorization failed. Transaction blocked by primary account holder. He froze. He knew what that meant. Only Evelyn had the authority. Far away, Evelyn sat at her table, phone face down, listening to the gentle hum of her wind chime outside the window. She didn't need to see their messages to know what they would say. At 8:27 a.m., her phone began to ring. Once, twice, then again. Voicemails stacked one after another. Mom, something's wrong with the card. Please call me. They're saying it's frozen. Mom, we can't check in. What did you do? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for her mug, took another sip of coffee, and looked at the photo of David beside her. You'd have loved this part, she whispered, smiling faintly. Because it wasn't revenge she felt. It was balance. At the airport, Sophie's parents were whispering, the children restless, the vacation unraveling before takeoff. Lucas called again, desperation in his voice.
Mom, please, if this is about the message, we can talk.
But Evelyn didn't pick up. Not this time. She stood, walked to her desk, and opened her notebook, the one titled Women Who Deserve to Be Seen. The page waited for her next step. As her family scrambled to save their trip, Evelyn began planning a new one, a journey not built on guilt or obligation, but on something far stronger, freedom. By the time Evelyn returned from her morning walk, her phone had stopped ringing. The storm had passed, at least on her end. On the other side of the silence, though, she knew chaos still echoed through airport speakers and frustrated sighs. She set her coffee mug down and opened her laptop once more. In her inbox sat a new message from the resort. Booking cancellation confirmed. Refund in process. Each word felt like a small release, like cutting a string that had held her in place too long. She took a deep breath and reached for her notebook. Across the top of a fresh page, she wrote in steady letters, those who deserve to be seen. Her pen moved with certainty this time, the names flowing like truth waiting to be spoken. Carol, who had spent decades taking care of everyone else but never herself. Nora, whose family forgot her birthday 6 years in a row. Francine, who raised 3 grandchildren but was left out of their weddings. June, who still wore her husband's watch, even though he'd been gone 15 years. Beverly, who once said, I've never seen the ocean, not once. Evelyn smiled softly. Well, Beverly, she thought, you're about to. She called the travel agent, the same one she had spent months coordinating with for her family's trip. Her voice was calm but firm. Hello, this is Evelyn Turner. I'd like to rebook the Pacific Paradise Villa under a new guest list. There was a pause on the other end. The same villa, ma'am? The very same, she said, smiling. But this time, make it for 7 women. No tags, no matching shirts, no photo-perfect captions. Just a table large enough for every story that had been silenced. As the agent confirmed the details, Evelyn's shoulders felt lighter. The villa she'd once reserved for people who forgot her would now host those who remembered what love truly looked like. Kindness without agenda, giving without being used. When the call ended, she sat quietly, letting the sound of the wind fill the house. The air felt different, freer somehow. She walked to the living room, picked up David's framed photo, and said softly, We're still going, love. Just not with them. Her reflection in the glass looked different. Not a victim, not a mother left behind, but a woman rediscovering her worth. She slipped the photo gently into her suitcase beside the lavender candle, the same candle she'd once planned to light with her family. Now it would burn for something greater. Evelyn thought the trip would heal old wounds, but what waited in Hawaii would do more than that. It would remind her, and 6 forgotten women, what it truly means to belong. The ocean air smelled different in person. Salt and sun mixed with something Evelyn couldn't name. Maybe it was freedom, maybe it was closure. The villa stood at the edge of the coast, where palm trees swayed lazily in the wind, and waves whispered secrets to the shore. Evelyn stepped through the open doorway first, her sandals brushing against cool stone tiles. Behind her, 6 women followed, each pausing in quiet disbelief. Beverly pressed a trembling hand to her lips. "I've never seen water so blue," she whispered. Carol laughed softly. "Can you believe this? Us on vacation?" Nora stood by the window, tears shining in her eyes as she looked out toward the horizon. Evelyn smiled. "We've all earned this," she said gently. "Every single one of us." They spent the first hour exploring, touching everything like children seeing magic for the first time. The air carried music from the ocean, and for the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel small. She felt seen. That evening, she unpacked the framed photo of David and placed it at the center of the long dining table. No one questioned it. No one asked her to move it aside. It simply belonged there as he always had. When dinner began, laughter filled the villa. Carol insisted on serving everyone herself, while June poured wine and kept refilling glasses like it was her job. Beverly toasted to finally being somewhere I don't have to clean afterward. The others burst into laughter. As the night deepened, Evelyn lit the lavender candle beside David's photo. The flame flickered softly, casting a warm glow across their faces. Francine leaned closer. "You really brought us here because you wanted company?" Evelyn shook her head, smiling. "No, I brought you here because we all deserved to be remembered, even if it had to start with each other." The table fell quiet, not with sadness, but with understanding, a deep, wordless kind that only women who've carried too much can share. Outside, the waves kept rolling, unbothered by time or history, and for the first time in a very long while, Evelyn felt something she hadn't since David passed: peace. Later that night, she stood alone on the balcony, the candle's scent drifting behind her. She looked up at the stars, thousands of them, bright and untamed, and whispered, "You were right, David. Kindness isn't weakness. It just needs better company." Behind her, laughter rose again, soft, healing, alive. Evelyn thought this trip would close a chapter, but as morning came, she realized it was only the beginning, because healing has a way of calling others to the light. Morning sunlight spilled through the open doors of the villa, painting the room in gold. The women gathered around the table in soft robes, their laughter blending with the sound of the sea outside. Evelyn watched them with quiet pride. A day ago, these women were strangers bound by loneliness. Now they moved like a family that had just been waiting to find each other. After breakfast, they wandered down to the beach together. The sand was warm beneath their feet, the waves curling gently around their ankles. Beverly bent down and let the water wash over her toes. "I can't believe it," she whispered. 68 years old, and this is the first time the ocean has touched me." Evelyn smiled softly. It's never too late to be seen by something beautiful. That night, they gathered again around the dining table. The lavender candle burned in the center, its soft scent mixing with the sea breeze. Evelyn looked around the table, each woman glowing in the candlelight, each carrying a lifetime of silence. "Let's try something," she said gently. "Tonight we'll each say one thing we wish someone had told us when we were younger." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Carol cleared her throat. "I wish someone had told me that being strong doesn't mean being alone," she said. Francine nodded. "I wish someone had told me I was allowed to rest." June whispered, "That love should never feel like a job interview." Nora's voice cracked slightly. "That I mattered even when no one noticed." Evelyn's eyes welled. Each sentence landed like truth finally being freed. She looked at the photo of David on the table, his smile frozen in eternal warmth, and took a slow breath. "I wish someone had told me," she said softly, "that sometimes you have to lose people to find yourself again." The candlelight trembled, and for a moment, the room was silent except for the ocean's hush, as if the waves themselves were listening. Then Beverly reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand. Evelyn smiled, not the polite kind, but one that came from deep within, the kind that felt like forgiveness. That night, as she lay in bed, the sound of laughter still echoing faintly down the hall, she realized something. This was what love looked like. Not obligation, not performance, just presence. But as peace finally settled in her heart, Evelyn's past came calling again, in the form of a single email waiting in her inbox the next morning. The ocean was calm that morning, soft waves brushing the sand like a secret whispered over and over. Evelyn sat on the villa's terrace with a cup of coffee, her hair still tousled from sleep. The women were inside, laughing about what to do that day. Maybe a boat ride, maybe nothing at all. For once, doing nothing felt like enough. She opened her laptop, meaning only to check her travel notes. But there it was, a new message, sitting at the top of her inbox. Subject, just want to clear the air. From Lucas Turner. Her chest tightened. She hadn't heard from him since the morning of their failed flight. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. Then she clicked. Hi Mom, we're back. Things didn't exactly go as planned. A lot went wrong, and I guess some of that's on us. I'm not saying everything was handled perfectly. Maybe we could have communicated better. Sophie says hi, by the way. She was stressed, and maybe that's why things came out wrong. You know how she gets. Anyway, we're kind of struggling right now. We had to rebook a few things on credit, and it's snowballing. So I was wondering if you could maybe return part of the original deposit or help us cover a bit of the new trip costs. I know this has been awkward, but we're still family. Let me know, Lucas. Evelyn leaned back slowly in her chair. For a long time, she said nothing. The sound of the waves filled the silence between the words he didn't write. I'm sorry, but those words never came. Instead, he asked for money again, as if love was a bill and she was still the one expected to pay it. She thought about the years she'd spent smoothing over every hurt, paying every emotional debt that wasn't hers. She thought about the laughter inside the villa, women who had given everything and asked for nothing. And then she smiled. For the first time, she felt no guilt in choosing silence. She closed the laptop gently, like closing the door to a room she'd finally outgrown. She looked out toward the horizon, where sunlight met the sea, and whispered, Love without respect isn't love, it's charity, and I'm done donating. Behind her, Francine called out, Evelyn, the girls want you to teach us that card game you mentioned. Evelyn turned, her smile soft but certain. Coming, she said. As she walked back inside, the email faded into memory, unread, unanswered, unnecessary. But that night, as the women gathered for one last dinner, Evelyn would learn that true closure doesn't come from getting an apology. It comes from realizing you no longer need one. The last evening came too soon. The sun sank low over the horizon, turning the ocean into a sheet of molten gold. The air was warm and still, carrying the faint scent of salt and lavender. Inside the villa, the women moved slowly, savoring every moment. Carol folded napkins into little hearts. Beverly arranged seashells down the center of the table. Nora hummed softly as she set out the glasses. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, holding a matchstick between her fingers. The lavender candle, the same one she had once packed for her grandchildren, waited in front of her. Around it, 6 other candles flickered, their wax low, their flame steady. Each one had been lit by one of the women throughout the week, each representing something reclaimed: peace, laughter, dignity, courage, friendship, and freedom. Now only one remained. This one, Evelyn said softly, was meant to be lit for my family, but maybe it was always meant for this instead. She struck the match. The flame flared, then steadied. She lowered it to the wick and watched it catch. The scent filled the air, sweet and soft, like memory itself. For a moment, No one spoke. Then Beverly reached out and covered Evelyn's hand with her own. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again, she whispered. Peace, gratitude, like I mattered. Evelyn smiled gently. You do. You always did. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the waves spilling through the open doors. The flickering light danced across their faces, illuminating years of strength hidden behind gentle smiles. Then, one by one, the women began to share something they'd been holding inside. Francine told the story of the husband who'd left her, and how she'd never once said his name aloud since. Nora confessed she'd kept her wedding dress for 50 years, not out of love, but because it was the only thing that ever felt truly hers. June laughed through tears as she said, I thought I'd come here to rest. I didn't know I'd come here to live again. Evelyn listened to them all, her heart swelling with something she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or healing, or both. When the last story ended, she rose from her chair, picked up David's photo, and walked out toward the beach. The others followed behind her, barefoot and quiet. The moonlight stretched across the water like a path leading home. The waves lapped at their feet, cool and forgiving. Evelyn turned to them and smiled. This is what family looks like, she said. No expectations, no pretending, just presence. The women stood in a circle, the candle flickering between them, its flame reflected in their eyes. For the first time in decades, Evelyn didn't feel left behind. She felt found. But as dawn crept over the waves and the candle burned low, Evelyn knew one truth she'd carry home. That freedom isn't about leaving others behind. It's about finally returning to yourself. The plane touched down in Oregon beneath a soft gray sky, the kind of weather Evelyn used to call thinking weather. Her suitcase rolled quietly behind her, still dusted with grains of Hawaiian sand that clung to its corners like memories refusing to leave. Home was quiet. The same wind chime David had hung years ago sang faintly by the porch, the sound as familiar as a heartbeat. Evelyn unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything looked the same. The old wooden table, the family photos, the lavender candle, now half burned and resting on the counter. She made herself a cup of tea and sat where it had all begun. The same kitchen chair where she once read Lucas's message that shattered her heart. But this time, the silence didn't ache, it comforted. Her laptop sat open on the table. She glanced at it, knowing the last message she'd received still waited there, unread, unanswered. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what it said. More excuses, more soft words that hid sharp truths. Instead, she opened a new document and began to type a title, The Forgotten Women. She smiled to herself. Maybe one day she'd write it all down, not as a warning, but as a reminder. That kindness doesn't mean compliance. That giving doesn't mean being taken. That even silence can roar if you let it. Outside, a bird landed on the railing, small, golden, and unafraid. It hopped toward the wind chime, brushing against it just enough to make it sing. Evelyn looked up, her eyes glistening. Still watching over me, huh? She whispered to David's photo on the wall. She stood and poured her tea into her favorite chipped mug, the one Lucas had given her when he was 9, back when love still meant pancakes on Mother's Day and tulips in spring. She ran her thumb along the rim and smiled, not with sadness, but with gratitude for what was, for what wasn't, and for everything she'd finally learned to let go. Later that evening, she placed David's framed photo on the mantel beside the lavender candle. When she lit it, the scent filled the room once more. But this time, it didn't represent loss. It represented freedom. Evelyn sat down, exhaled deeply, and whispered to the quiet house. They may have forgotten me, but I remembered myself, and that's enough. The wind outside stirred gently, as if the world itself agreed. Her story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. And as the candle flickered softly against the dark, Evelyn knew her silence had finally found its voice. This was Evelyn's story, but it might also be yours. If you've ever given everything and been forgotten, Remember this: love given freely is never wasted, it just waits to find its way home. Subscribe to Grandma Stories Studio, where silence becomes strength and every forgotten heart finally finds its voice.